I believe that ambition is also a state, not a trait. And I think it's important to make that distinction in the sense that ambition can go up and down over time. It's not always that we're going to be in a state of drive. And I think some of these definitions, especially that last one, my hope is that it actually creates a little bit of freedom around what people feel around ambition.
Welcome to Leadership Shock podcast, the podcast that is affiliated with Leadership Shock, the book. I am the host, Pete Steinberg, and the author of said book, and I'm excited to have a very special guest joining us today, Kathy Oneto. Kathy's very special because we have a long working history together that goes back more than 10 years, and currently Kathy and I partner on a lot of projects. But Kathy is here because she is also a very new author. I'm a relatively new author and has recently published the book Sustainable Ambition, and we are here to talk about that book. So, Kathy, welcome to the Leadership Shock podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Pete. I'm excited to be in conversation. I always like speaking with you. So
I
here we go.
appreciate that, Kathy. Our conversations will give everyone a little bit of a look under the tent. Kathy and I balance each other very well. So I sent her. I did help her prepare, which is something that Kathy is much better at than I am, by sending the topics I wanted to talk about 20 minutes before the recording. So
You're very on brand, Pete. So that's
I know.
great.
So together, I do everything at the last minute. Kathy does everything well in advance. On average, we probably do it about the way everyone else does it. So anyway, well, I'm very excited to be talking to you about sustainable ambition. I think it's a really interesting take. I think it's going to be very relevant to a lot of our listeners. And I think there's some real parallels and connections to what I talk about in Leadership Shock. So I want to start with sort of like a bit of a myth. So Kathy, you and I both work on Ready, Set, Grow. It's a program that we run for KPMG Partners. And there's a session in that looks at what we might call work-life balance. Right? And actually, and it's ended up just called work and life. That's what we ended up calling it. And I feel like that's what you bring really to the fore in sustainable ambition, that work-life balance is a myth. So can you talk a little bit about that and really maybe dig into what's the real challenge people are talking about when they say work-life balance?
Yes. Yeah, especially for people who are ambitious across both their work and their personal life. The reality is this term balance just sets the wrong expectations, and that's why I think it's a myth. People keep chasing it, but it's this elusive mirage, and oftentimes, even if you were to ask people, well, what does work-life balance mean to you? They can describe that. And honestly, I think what I would support is what people want to create for themselves, right? But the problem with the term is that it sets these expectations that everything is always going to be in equilibrium between your work and your life. That's just not a reality. One is always, taking up more space than the other. And it's always changing as well. It's dynamic. It's never in equilibrium. And so it sets this expectation. It also makes people think that there's going to be hard boundaries between work and life. And that's not true. And especially in today's world, and especially how we work and how we want to live, there's a lot of integration. There always has been. And then I personally also just don't like that they put that work is first in that word, that phrase, if you will. And because it then implies that work should always come first versus work is just a part of the vessel of our life. And so I just don't think it sets the right expectations. It also isn't a term that actually says, oh, here's how I can start to, like, what does work-life balance mean? How do I actually start to step into that? And that's what I was trying to resolve in some respects, amongst many other things, with sustainable ambition. And so I think the thing that we're really challenged by is, how do I manage my time and effort and go after the things that I want in my life and in my work, and manage the conflicts that I feel that are inevitably going to happen, uh, because we can't do everything. And so, how do I manage those conflicts that come up and make the choices that I want to make around what really matters and how I want to spend my time and my energy?
So I think, you talk about choice, and choice is, I think, a really interesting phrase here. Um, I wonder if we like these, time management, work life balance, all these things. It's like, are people running away from like the choices that they need to make? Like they end up just not confronting the fact that actually I stayed at work till 10 o'clock. That was a choice I made, right? And so I didn't have dinner with my kids. Do you think that's one of the challenges that people face when we think about these, the work life balance question?
I think so. There's a great quote. I think it is from Oliver Berkman, and I'm not going to have it at my fingertips right now, but where he says, and I think I reference it in the book, where he says essentially, to some degree, some of this busyness that we are in is partly because we are keeping ourselves from facing those difficult choices that we have to make. We're not willing to look them in the face and actually interrogate and investigate. Well, what are the trade-offs in these decisions that I'm making, and what are the consequences of those choices, and am I being intentional, which I know you really espouse and I agree with. Am I being intentional and making choices that really matter to me and that align with what's most important to me?
Yeah, and am I willing to own the outcomes that come from that choice? Right. I mean, I think that's the thing and I think this leads into this idea, I think, of ambition, right?
Mm.
Because I think people, if they make intentional choices, they they don't want to intentionally say, actually, my career ambition is more important right now than having dinner with my kids. Now, they might believe it, like deep that's the choice they're making when they're staying to dinner at 10, but it's really hard for them to articulate because they their definition of ambition is getting the next job or getting the bigger job or like those sorts of things. So ambition, just that word, like we talked about work life balance as a word, right? I always like Adam Russell's phrase. He always says one of the problems with the English language is that we have like one word for lots of things. And I think ambition is one of those things where we have one word for lots of things. So how do you really define like ambition? What does that actually mean? How should we be thinking of ambition beyond just the next job?
Yes. Well, I will admit, in playing it with this term, I am playing with it, and I am, deliberately pushing back on our typical societal perspectives on what this word means. And so there's a couple of different ways that I think about ambition. One is I think about it as a noun. So I often or do use ambition interchangeably with goal. What do I just want to pursue? What is my aspiration? But if I were to build that out and align this with kind of a more true definition of ambition, and I agree with this definition, which is there's three components to an ambition. There's what is that goal or aspiration, or around that goal, what is my aspiration? How good do I want to be, or what am I stretching for? And then what is my motivation behind that? What's the energy that I have behind that, which is one of the areas I really lean into in the book around this. And then what's also the commitment or the determination that you have around this. How committed are you to this goal such that you're willing to put in the amount of effort to
Mm.
actually reach it? And that can vary over time. So that's one aspect of thinking about ambition. Then the other component of it, and I will admit, this is actually something I say in the book, and now I would probably edit how I articulate it quite a little bit because I say, another way that I think about it is an adjective, right? It's used to describe people who are ambitious. I've already been using it in that way. So I say in the book, and I will say, and this is what academic literature says, like, it's a trait. We are naturally ambitious as humans, and that can vary across all of us, in terms of our natural drive. But I've also say that, I believe that ambition is also a state, not a trait. And I think it's important to make that distinction in the sense that ambition can go up and down over time. It's not always that we're going to be in a state of drive. And I think some of these definitions, especially that last one, my hope is that it actually creates a little bit of freedom around what people feel around ambition, because we often, especially ambitious people, often see that as part of their identity, and when it shifts, it really messes with their sense of identity.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, I think what's interesting in your three parts of the ambition is that lots of people can articulate the goal, right? I want to be a CEO, I want to be a CFO, I want to run my own business, I want to be an entrepreneur. Like they can do that, but like why? Why is that? And that's something that we talk about in Leadership Shock. We talk about this idea of metacognition, which is like, well, what is it that makes you like? Because I think unpacking that allows people to have some of that freedom that you've talked about. Like, just because it's always been there, right? So, why should my goal be when I'm 25 the same when I'm 35? Well, the only reason the goal is the same is because I've never really reflected on it. And I think the thing that you bring up in the book that I think is really powerful, which isn't something that I'd really thought about, was the ebb and flow of the drive towards it. And I think I see that a lot with my coaching clients in the C-suite, especially with family. And we'll talk about this a little bit. But actually, like I have a finite amount of energy. Like, where should that energy go? Right? And how intentional am I? So I feel like there's a lot of clarity around the goal. People don't know why, and they're not intentional about where they put their energy. And so we probably shouldn't be surprised that people are confused around their ambition and how they want to manage that. They don't have an ability to manage it because they haven't really dug deep into that. How do you get people to kind of dig a little bit deeper past the goal part of the ambition?
So let me just first really briefly share the sustainable ambition method so that people are aware of these different three components that we're talking about, which is I invite people to really become more conscious about their ambitions and to manage them wisely by aligning the right ambitions at the right time with the right effort. So that conscious piece, Pete, is like getting metacognitive, right? Getting more intentional about one's ambitions, as you were saying, and kind of interrogating them, if you will. Maybe a
Right.
little bit more gently, not so much interrogating them, but
I like
maybe
interrogate. I like that. Investigate, maybe, or
investigate.
explore.
Yes,
Explore and
exactly.
investigate. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And, really what I'm inviting people to do in that is like to get connected to their ambitions, right? And to understand them and to get, I say, to motivate your own effort behind them. And so what I do in the book is invite people to explore like, well, what are your motivations that can guide how you then frame your ambitions, or how you link your ambitions to these different things that motivate you. And so the four areas I talk about is like, what's your vision for your life, for your work? How do you want to give and contribute? That you might articulate as purpose, although you and I use that term a little differently, Pete, but similarly too. I also talk about, what do you love to do? And in that, I think between give and love, those intrinsic motivators, I think is how you and I talk about purpose. And then the final is like, what are your values? And so, how I invite people to explore that is through those motivations, and then to say, okay, how are these ambitions connected to that? And so, just if I can briefly just go back to one of the things you were talking about is like making this decision, right? Am I staying in the office to work late, because I'm prioritizing potentially my career, but I still care about my family? First off, I don't think that has to be an either or choice. There is an and here. I can both invest in my career and have a big job, and I can say that my family is important. And I think what's helpful in doing this investigation is getting clear on, for example, when I'm making these choices, like, hey, if I'm investing time in my career, how is that connected to also my value, where you can coordinate, right? Your goals and say, hey, this is serving a purpose of both investing in my career and investing in my family, because making sure that I'm successful in my career supports what I want for my family
Right.
and what we have. Or, getting really clear on like, what does being, having family as a value, what does that look like for you? What's that
Right.
specifically for you? And getting clear on that, because we have all these ideal norms of what it is, but get specific on what it means for you.
Yeah. I find that last one really interesting. Partly because I find myself in my coaching work often working with people that are trying to do this. Be a good parent and be a good career corporate warrior. And one of the things I think is really challenging in that space is that it is our goals on the career side are very well articulated, but our goals on the family side are very vague. So actually, the first thing I do, and it's sort of like I think it's very similar to what you do. It's just a coaching practice. I'm like, well, what is it about family that's important to you? Like, what do you need to do for you to feel like a good parent? Because maybe being at dinner isn't actually the thing for you. Maybe it's being at the soccer game. Maybe it like what are these things? And if you don't write down those tangible values, two things happen. One is you actually can't make the intentional choice we're talking about. And the second thing, you will always feel badly because there's this amorphous thing, probably that goes back to the 1950s, that I should not leave my house till 8:30 and I should be back at 5, and that's what work is. And so we grew up seeing that as being what a parent, maybe a working parent, is, right? And so if I'm not doing that and I'm traveling or I'm staying late, I don't meet that goal. So I think this kind of investigation and metacognition is really powerful for people to be able to make some of those. It's almost like we're currently making uninformed choices.
Exactly.
If you're making it, they're uninformed. We need to make informed choices, and all we have to do is stop and think, and we can make informed choices. The next part of your model in your book, or the sustainable ambition model, is this idea of right time. And so that's again where Leadership Shock has a connection, because in Leadership Shock, we talk about career shifts, right? And things happening around. So talk about how you think about this idea. So we have right ambition. How do you think about right time?
Right time has a couple of different lenses. One is thinking about it with eyes wide open in terms of considering choices you're making for yourself with life stage in mind and not ignoring what is happening in your life as you're making choices and making prioritization decisions. The other component of it is keeping that life stage in mind in the sense of, and you already articulated this, Pete, which is we change and what we
Right.
prioritize and what we need from both our work and our life changes over time. And so making sure that's clear for you as you're making these choices. And then another key component is not feeling like you have to do everything all at once and instead really saying what is important, what matters now. And so I talk about pacing ourselves and really getting clear on what am I going to do now, near, and next. And these aren't easy choices, right? We play with this concept of time there's all these different senses, right? Like time is long. We have lots of time. We squander our time. No, you got to carpe diem. Time is short. And all of it is true. And yet, what's also true is our time is finite. We can't do everything all at once. And so, what choices are we making? And that really is about not trying to do it all, but doing what really matters to you most right
Yeah.
now.
What's the impact though of the external pressures that exist? And
Hmm.
those could come from family, but they could come from you've been identified as a high potential, right? Or you're on the track to the C-suite, right? Like all of these things. How does that impact the way I think about time? How does that impact the way I need to kind of still make the choice about where I spend my time, and how can I still own it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm going to give you an idealized point, and then I'll get answer your actual question, which is, my personal feeling is I really wish organizations would not confuse potential with pace. And I think there is this assumption. I was just with, one of my good friends last week, and she reminded me again that, she used to work at Goldman. She was very successful. She had her first child, and she went back to her boss and said, "Hey, could I work part time?" And he said, "You could, but it just says to me that you're not ambitious anymore." And to me, I'm just like, no. I mean, trying to work at Goldman half time, part time, and trying to be a parent is actually quite ambitious. And so
I don't know what half-time at Goldman.
I
Half-time at Goldman
know.
is like 40 hours a week. Like it's just
Exactly.
40 hours, right? It's just a regular work day.
Exactly. 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 So I do wish we didn't confuse these two, that somebody could still be seen as being high potential even if they were to slow down their pace. But that wasn't what you were asking. You were asking, like, what is this? How do I really navigate this pressure? And the only thing that I can say, well, there's probably a couple different things I say. I'll start here, which is I do think it's wise to just look at these choices like with eyes wide open. And again, I think it comes down to a couple things. One, getting really clear about, okay, for each of these ambitions or goals that I have, what does success for me really look like? The second is being okay with making your world small during a time that you have a lot that you're trying to manage. So it could very well be like, oh my gosh, I'm stepping in to be a CEO. I know I've coached people like this. I know people like this in my world that, like, hey, I'm stepping into a CEO role. I also have two young children at home. I'm a single parent. And guess what? My world gets small in terms of, yes, I'm being choiceful about when I'm investing in other things in my life. So I do think you have to make choices like that. And then the final thing I'll say is that, you know, I don't with sustainable ambition. It's a no judgment zone. It's like, who am I to say, like, don't live big? Like, no, make the choices that are important for you. But my hope is then, what are the structures you need to put in place to make it
Right.
sustainable? And
Yeah.
by the way, we're going to get to right effort, but, like, working 80 hours a week is not going to be the way.
Well, I mean, I'm always like when I work with clients that work 80 hours a week, I'm always like, what do you actually do? Like, because I love your idea of pace, because actually during our work week, our pace fluctuates, right? And as you know, I speak as a procrastinator, so I can work very fast the day before the deadline. Like I'm very intense. Like 2 weeks before the deadline, I can still fill that time, but I'm not as intense in how I work. So I think that pace versus potential, I think, is a really powerful concept. And I really love that. And I think we've both worked with clients that have made choices to slow down and then speed up later. Right? I'm just going to slow down now. Interestingly, when I worked with a client that did that, their biggest concern was being bored in the new job. Like, so they made a choice to slow down for a bit, take a sideways role, but the job just wasn't as interesting. And I'm like, yeah, that's the explicit trade-off you are making, right? You're
Well,
still
and
going to get paid, you're still going to get to work, you're not going to work on weekends, and the job's going to be just a little boring.
right. And you know, again, these are trade-offs we're making, right? And it's kind
Right,
of like there is personal work to be done when we make some of these choices. And I think this is what's hard for ambitious people, is like when it's part of our identity or we get used
right,
to that rhythm and that pace, it takes some transitioning time, and it takes acknowledging, that for me, it's a part of, this is why I think working on our identity and actually embracing ambition as being more holistic allows us to see ourselves as more whole. And my
yeah,
hope is by embracing that, when you make some of those choices, you actually can, you know, um, not, it just isn't so hard for you to step into it and to be
right.
okay with it. Right.
Right. It's interesting because I see that a lot in elite sport when an athlete goes to the World Cup or goes to the Olympics and then retires. And for the last 15 years of their life, they've been defined by being a really world-class rugby player.
Hmm.
And and the ones that successfully transition, or the ones that have an easier transition, are the ones that have always had something else. They've always had something else. They've been more holistic in how they've viewed themselves. And so it's interesting. You're absolutely right. When I've worked, I recently worked with, or I had a conversation with someone that was really struggling with like taking the next big job or the family question. And literally it was like, if I'm not taking the next big job, who am I? Like that was fundamentally what it got down to. right? And so there's some work that has to be done to do that. So I want to get to the third part of the sustainable ambition model, which is right effort. Now, we've kind of talked about this. It's about intentionality and prioritization and all those things. But tell us a little bit more about how right effort comes to life in the sustainable ambition framework.
Yes. So there are two components to this element of the method, which really acknowledges that we as humans have two states that we go through, which is we use our energy and we need to restore it. And that is a biological reality. And also it's not just sufficient with sleep. We actually, there are different cadences of restoration that we need. And so I look at this through a lens of like, again, are we being discerning about where we're putting our effort and where we want to put in our hard work? And are we being discerning about how we're restoring ourselves? And so those are the two components of what I explore in right effort.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love the idea of, or the word restoration. Like I think that that is really powerful. I recently had a conversation with a client who had a difficult client discussion one day where one of their team really struggled or made a mistake, got up early, did their workout, like oh, they had like a client dinner, got up early the next morning, did their workout, probably got like 4 hours sleep, went into work and ended up having a big blowout like argument with the person on their team. And they were like, that's just not me. And I'm like, well, let's have a look at the choices you made, right? Like you've kind of set up the environment. So it feels like this idea of um, right effort for you is again this holistic view. So what are some of the ways that I can? I'm actually might take some notes on this, but what are some of the ways that I can be more effective in balancing my efforts? Maybe we use that word, maybe balancing, but maybe me being more choiceful about where I spend my time and putting my effort into things that maybe are a little bit might seem a little non-linear, like not directly related to what I'm trying to do, but actually in the long term gets a payoff.
Mm. Yeah, well, maybe I'll look at it with those two lenses. So, I mean, the first is, you even shared this earlier, Pete, which is like, are we exploring our ambitions and actually getting clear on what's required to pursue that? And so one of the things that even got me to start to explore ambition was reading the book by Paul Arden about, hopefully I'm getting his name right, it's not how good you are, it's how good you want to be. And it, literally the book got me on page 2, which has this visual of like different individuals leading up to Napoleon, where it's like, good, somewhat good, good, it's like best in my field, best in the world, and it's like,
Right.
huh, have I committed to that? Like, have I been clear? And, our ambitions grow over time. So, but I think pausing to actually say, and I have questions in the book that align to kind of the definition of ambition that I spoke to, which is like, well, how good do I want to be on this? What is worth the hard work? Am I, committed, and what's my level of determination around this? And, what is my desired effort and what's the required effort around this, which
Mm,
connects to motivation. And I think just taking some time to just explore, like, how important is this, and being discerning about, and honestly, you could use this across everything that's on your desk. Not everything, rises to this level of, ambition, but it's like, we're managing all these different things that we have on our plate. But it's really the challenging of like, does everything require hard work? I mean, it kind of goes back to even Greg McKeown and what he writes in a couple of his books, Essentialism and Effortless, like, what if this could be easy? Or I talk about like, leverage the Pareto principle, like, what if this could be done? Like, where it's kind of like, you know what, I'm going to give 20% to get the 80%. And your
yeah.
80% more often than not is going to be the 100%. So I'm just going to say though, Pete, you know me, and this is where I struggle the most. So I'm just going to admit this to everybody that this isn't easy. But I think again, keep coming back to intentionality. That's what I think is really important on it. Do you want me to pause for a second before I go on to like the restoration side?
Well, I guess I just want to share. There's a little. I would also share something. My dad was like an amazing historian. He like retired at 82 from Penn. He wrote books. He did all these amazing things. But he never felt like he was good enough. Like he would always win awards for like the best lecturer, but he would literally write his lectures and he would practice them, but he did it so well that people just thought it was natural. But he put so much effort in because he never thought he was going to be good enough. I don't have that. I actually always feel like that probably 80% is going to be good enough for me. And one of the things that I really liked about coaching the US women's national team is actually my 80% wasn't good enough. Like it was a moment when I had to be at my best. Because if I wasn't at my best, there's a whole bunch of people who are committing huge amounts of time and effort and energy. And so I'm one of those people that need that extrinsic pressure to be at my best. I'm okay. I sometimes it can be easy for me. I actually like it when it's not. But for my dad, he always felt like he wasn't good enough. And I feel like there's a little bit of maybe my dad in you, Kathy, and kind of like the thing that drives you is that, and also I think there's just a drive where you're like, no, this needs to be absolutely amazing. Everything that you do, Kathy, is amazing. And that's almost like a requirement for you. And if it's not amazing, like you don't feel good about it. And so there were these like this is where we're all different, right? And this is where we're and this is where like there are no answers. There's just exploration. And I think
Totally.
that's like, and I think that's what I'm hearing in sustainable ambition is it's the exploration of all of these concepts and frameworks that I think is the power, right? Just giving yourself time to explore it. And I think that's what probably the book gives you. Why don't you share one more thing about restoration before we close this up?
Yes, yes. So I'm going to share a quote that I really love from Doris Kearns Goodwin, who is the presidential biographer, very well known, who wrote, or she said this in her masterclass: "The most underappreciated leadership strength is the ability to relax and replenish energy." And so she goes on to share how Lincoln, FDR, others like invested in their restoration on a regular basis and what it looked like. And it was different for each of them. But it's just to say leaders need to be intentional about how they are restoring themselves. And so I talk about creating a sustaining plan, having a minimum viable sustaining plan, and to recognize too, this is personal and it will change on you. So you need to come back to it. But identifying practices that you are investing in to make sure you're restoring yourself is really critical. And if presidents can do it, even with the staff, I'm just saying you can do it too.
There's one thing that I'll just highlight here, and as you know, we're fortunate enough to be able to take some of our clients down to um, uh, the U.S. Olympic training site in Chula Vista to train with the women's sevens teams. And one of the things that we share with and we talk about what it is to be a really elite performer. And one of the things is mindfulness. And so when we say mindfulness, people think about meditation, but mindfulness is actually, oh, today was a really hard day. I need to be really careful tomorrow. I need to give myself more time tomorrow because today was hard. I found that yesterday. I had a very long day. I had a virtual training. I had meetings back to back. I wanted to go meet my son at 3. I met my son at 3. Then we did this and we did that. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just didn't have like, and I said, today, I need to take it easy. And that elite athletes are not like this is where I think your idea of pace is really powerful. Elite athletes manage their pace so they can be at their best when they need to be, right? And I think that's a really important part of this like restoration idea.
Totally. I will just say when I am going through intense periods, and I've had years that have been intense periods, I'm just going to, you and I both have gone through a book launch process, like that's coming off of an intense period. But pacing is the number one strategy I use. I am so intentional about my pace and building in restoration times during those periods. And that is what gets me through and ensures I don't burn out.
And this goes all the way back to this, like the first thing that we said, which is like really thinking about your ambition and really thinking about sort of like being clear about what it is that you need to do. And you've said this a couple of times, and then being clear about what it takes to do the things that you need to do. Because one of the struggles that we all have is that when we have those intense moments, is like, is it okay for me to go for a walk for an hour in the middle of the day? Is it okay for me to watch TV in the middle of the day? Is it okay for me to read a book? Is it okay for me to take a nap? And it's like the answer to all of those is yes, those are all okay in this world where you understand what you're trying to achieve, right? You understand exactly like where you are in your life and why that's important. And you understand the effort that you need to do to get to where you want to go. Those things are all like, you can do all of those, but it's sometimes really hard. What's your number one for you restoration activity? What's the one thing that you do that thinks restore? Is it running? Did it used to be running?
I think it probably still is running, and I'm running despite really shouldn't be because of my knees, but it's just the thing that gives me the endorphins and also the like for me restoration too is like getting my ideas flowing, and that is just restorative to me and energizing for me, and nothing does it quite like getting outside and running.
I think that's great. Well, look, Kathy, this has been a great discussion. Loved learning more about sustainable ambition. It's out now. We'll put a link in the show notes. Also, Kathy has a really, really great podcast that has a lot of really interesting people in it. I
Including
think,
Pete.
including me. I'm one of the less interesting people. I'm one of the less interesting people, but like really, really like great podcast if you want to learn more about this. So please check out the podcast, check out the book, give it it's on audiobook. You can get it at your local bookstore. Look for sustainable ambition. So really interesting. Just to recap for me some of the key takeaways, this idea of being really reflective on your goals and being more holistic about how you think about that. So this idea of sort of like, really being clear about what the right ambition is, understanding that we change, right? And so it's the right time to pursue the right ambition, and then thinking about like the effort. And I love like your minimal viable product or your minimal viable sustainability plan. I think that like the idea of sort of like making sure that you have like this and this concept of pace, Kathy, is something I'm definitely going to steal leverage for myself and for others. So this was Pete Steinberg for the Leadership Shock podcast. The book is also for sale, so please check it out and check out the other episodes that we have here for Leadership Shock. And I hope everyone leaves here with a better understanding of what their sustainable ambition is.